back to the Wellness Check. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about brain spotting. I did a video a couple months ago on it and have gotten some questions about the difference between an activation spot and a resource spot. And I thought it was such a great question and something to expand on for anyone that is trying to learn about brain spotting or considering getting it done with a brain spotting therapist. So when we are setting up to work on brain spotting, maybe work on a memory, an upsetting memory, something that's been traumatic, or maybe you're just experiencing anxiety, depression, nervousness about something coming up, we can do brain spotting on it. And we first identify what it is that you want to focus on. There are two different ways that we can kind of go about processing when it comes to the actual spot that you're using in your visual field. So if you don't remember, the premise of brain spotting is where you look affects how you feel. You can look more into this by Googling David Grand. He is the developer of brain spotting. And it's important as a brain spotting therapist to know your client well enough to know if you need to be working from a resource spot or from the activation spot. So let's just talk about what those are and how we know which one to use when we're doing brain spotting. The activation spot is the spot we find together in a couple different ways we can find that. And it's where the client is able to identify, or the therapist is able to identify, the exact space in the client's visual field where when they're thinking about the said target, they start to feel a little bit more activated. And what that means is just maybe they're swallowing more, or they're starting to get a little more nervous. Their heart rate is going up. Maybe they're tensing their muscles. This is activation. This is physical activation, and we can also have cognitive or emotional activation as well. So that's how we know that we have really honed in on the spot that we need to in order to help this client, this individual, process whatever material we're focusing on. Now, there are situations where an individual has maybe some difficulty staying in their window of tolerance. Maybe they dissociate easily or panic easily, or just the material is very sensitive or very raw, and we need to go about this a different way. And that's where the beauty of using a resource spot comes from. So if we are helping the client find their spot in their visual field, and we find an activation spot and they say, whoa, that's definitely the activation spot right there. I don't know if I can handle it today, or it's just too much today, I can't. That's fine. We remember where that spot is, and then we go about on the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis, and I'll explain that, to find a spot that they're able to think about the target, the issue that we are focusing on, and stay more relatively in that window of tolerance. So maybe there's a little bit more activation, like, yes, it feels really relevant when I look right here, right here, right here, but it's more manageable. And in fact, I feel like I'm starting to process that thoughts are happening. I'm going through the story sequentially, but I'm able to manage it much better. That is likely going to be the client's resource spot. So David Grand, he uses the metaphor of if we're using the activation spot, the one that hits head on to the target, that's the analogy of going straight up the mountain. We are climbing this mountain together. We're going to get to the top of the mountain. We are going to process this material together. Straight line, pretty much. Now, think about the resource spot as you still have the same mountain, but instead of heading straight up, we are circling around and up. So we're getting to the top of the mountain. We are going to process the material. We're just doing it in a more roundabout way. We're doing it in a way that suggests that it's safer. We can take our time here. We are in that window of tolerance, and the client is able to move along more appropriately in that way, maybe without disengaging or dissociating or falling into a panic attack. So I wanted to share that with you, that if you're thinking about brain spotting with your therapist, make sure first and foremost that they are trained and or certified in brain spotting, and let this therapist begin to kind of know who you are, are the presenting issues, and what are you trying to work on basically what are the presenting things while you're coming into therapy. And together you guys can decide what that window of tolerance looks like for you, what the content is that's within those memories and experiences, and if we need to take that route of going straight up to the mountain, use that activation spot and pinpoint it and go from there, or if we need to find that resource spot, spiral up the mountain together, and even a combination of two is okay too. So I've had many clients that really want to do the work, they're ready, they're having a really resilient day, so we pick that activation spot, and they know within themselves, because we've done a lot of grounding work by then, that maybe they're about to fall out of the window of tolerance, it's getting to be a little bit too much, and we've already picked their spots, so they know where their resource spot is and they know where their activation spot is, and they will, on their own volition, just what feels intuitive, bounce in between. So they'll hold their gaze at an activation spot for a moment. Then if they need a little break, we don't have to stop processing. We just go to the resource spot. And you can see the body language kind of start to settle. Their shoulders come down. Their respiration calms down. The tension in their face begins to settle. And once they feel like they are calm, cool, collected, they're able to think about it, they can go right back up to the activation point themselves. And it's just very client-led, client in control. And it takes a little while to get there. It takes a lot of trust with your therapist to also be able to keep an eye out and detect potentially if someone might be falling out of the window. But once you get the hang of it, you can really kind of go back and forth on your own. And it's a beautiful thing, and it does not interrupt the processing. And by the end of the session, the person is in a better headspace when it's time to go, when it's time to leave the office and go back to work or go home or whatever the situation is there. They tend to be in a much calmer state of mind. So those are the two spots that I wanted to talk about with Brainspotting. We have the activation spot straight up the mountain. Let's get straight to it. And then we have the resourcing spot spiraling up together, just feeling a lot more safe and more manageable. So stay tuned. My next video is going to be about what the Z-axis, X-axis, and Y-axis are, what to expect if you're going to go into therapy, and what your therapist is even talking about when it comes to that. So stay tuned. Thank you for checking in with your wellness, and I'll see you soon.